As the dark clouds of world recession loomed over the nation, the Rudd government announced a bold green stimulus package to insulate 2.7 million Australian homes.
This is the most exciting, ambitious energy efficiency program that we will ever see, and it's open for business.
Within months of the $2.5 billion program starting, things began to go terribly wrong. By March of this year, there had been more than 120 fires, massive rorting and fraud. But worst of all, the deaths of 4 young men. And it's not over yet.
We're actually seeing an increase in house fires due to poorly placed insulation under this new scheme.
But who is really responsible for the debacle? The Fuller family have been on a 6-month quest to establish the truth. Why did their son die? And why were the safety warnings ignored?
Who do you hold responsible for Matt's death?
The government. The government for rolling out that insulation package with no plan. Just put it out there and see what happens, fix it on the go. That's what they did.
Four Corners talks to an Environment Department insider who reveals that safety warnings were ignored.
It's just a case of we told you so. Unfortunately and tragically, it's a case of we told you so.
Tonight on Four Corners, what went wrong in the home insulation scheme and who's to blame?
Next one.
It began like any other day. Brisbane, October 14, last year. The federal government's home insulation program had been in full swing for less than 4 months. It had fuelled a frenzy of activity. Almost overnight, thousands of new businesses had sprung up to insulate over 500,000 homes. $750 million had been pumped into the economy. At 21 Buttercup Close in Meadowbrook, south of Brisbane, the owner had been sold on foil insulation by a door-to-door salesman. It wouldn't cost him a cent.
And so he knocked on the door and said, "Oh, do you want some free installation because of the government rebate?" He just gave me a little sample what it was going to be like in the roof and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, and then we did the paperwork and that was it.
By 10 a.m, as the mercury started to soar, 2 young installers, Matthew Fuller and Monique Pridmore, turned up for work.
They were planning their life together. They wanted to get some money together, get a home, have a family. And this was offering good money. If you worked hard, if you put in the hours and you worked hard, you could earn good money.
Matthew had been installing foil insulation for just 6 days, Monique only 4, and she'd received no training.
Matt and Monique were told, get it done quickly, get it done well, because they're already upset. They were told to get there at 10 o'clock in the middle of October heat in Queensland.
It was hot and dirty work. The temperature in the ceiling some 20 degrees higher than outside.
They got there and did all the normal things, go up and measure the roof, cut the foil, go and install the insulation.
Matt and Monique wore only cotton gloves and no protective clothing.
They just went out in their shorts, sneakers, T-shirt. All the equipment they were given, I think, was just a headlamp, you know, like a miner's torch, which wasn't adequate because Matt had to go and buy a better lamp from the local hardware store because they didn't have enough light with those little headlamps.
And they needed to be able to see what they were doing to miss the cables.
As Matthew Fuller was getting to the end of the job, he fired a metal staple through a live cable, electrifying all the foil insulation.
Monique was probably 8 foot away from him. He either expelled air or said a rude word. It was just sound, collapsed. And Monique got concerned. She rushed over to him thinking that he's in pain or tired, because they sweat a lot in those roofs. So she goes over to help, grabbed him, and then she sees he's shaking. She then grabs him a second time to try and pull him out from where he is to try and help him. But obviously at that point, he's still being electrically shocked. She gets shocked. She gets thrown a somersault, ends up being her leg wrapped up in insulation. And then she's being shocked for a considerable time. She's shouting for the power to be turned off. She's shouting for help. In no time at all, 2 ambulances got there, the doctor came out, and they did everything they could on the scene. They took Matt and Monique to the Logan Hospital. They worked on Matt for about 3/4 of an hour.
Somebody knocked on the door and these 2 plainclothes police came in. And I can't remember, I think they asked if I was Matthew's mum. And it's weird, you see that on the TV. You see that on TV shows where people just are told when something happens and you wonder how you'd react. And it's just like on TV. You just scream, no. I just knew.
"25-year-old Matthew Fuller became the first fatality in the home insulation program. His girlfriend, Monique Pridmore, is still recovering from her serious injuries. By the time the home insulation program was suspended in February, 3 more young installers were dead. 2 were electrocuted and the other died of heat exhaustion. Following the death of his only child, Kevin Fuller began a painstaking investigation to find out who was responsible. It was one thing to fight the grief, quite another to get some answers.
At the time, we just thought it was a tragic accident.
A South Auckland man is dead after he was electrocuted while stapling insulation under his house.
It didn't take long, just a few days after Matthew's death, for the Fullers to discover that what happened to Matthew was not an isolated case. In New Zealand in 2007, 3 home handymen were electrocuted while using metal staples to install foil insulation under their floors. The deaths prompted the New Zealand government to issue a public warning about the dangers of using metal staples when installing foil insulation. New Zealand has since banned foil from its scheme.
I went on the web, and I'm not a good web person, but trust me, in the government there must be some really good web people. They spent 6 months putting the programme together, but they couldn't go on the web and find out that in 2007 5 people were killed putting metal staples into foil insulation and being electrocuted.
So he started digging into, if this happened in 2007 in New Zealand, how come this package has been rolled out here without taking any into account what's happened overseas? You'd think that we'd have some sort of safety precautions there. They'd look into that and not make the same mistake.